Good evening. Welcome to the Dead Zone. This is a place where the strange and unusual occurrences happen, a place where people exhibit the most outlandish and reckless behavior, a place that seems to be out of a scary sci-fi movie. It may even seem that you crossed into another dimension of time and space. No, folks, the dead zone is real, and the people that reside there are real, but mentally dead. Some are this way due to being naive. Others are this way because of a daily consumption of false and misleading information. Sadly to report, many are this way because of willful ignorance. We will attempt to resurrect these individuals from the dead zone. We will try to give them a regular dose of reality and a healthy diet of true and factual information. Soon, the brain-dead individual should reverse course and recover. The individual should be left with a thriving and thinking brain and escape the dead zone. Welcome back to another episode of the Dead Zone. I am Dr. Jess Meek, and today we will be reviewing the past. With all this talk about reparations, people still want their 40 acres and a mule, due to the fact that blacks are descendants of slaves. But contrary to popular belief, government and whites are not the only people that benefited from black slaves. Yes, today I will be also going back down memory lane, because when I resided in Los Angeles, I attended El Camino College, and I was able to obtain my associate's degree by only taking African American history. So when I moved out of Los Angeles to Oklahoma and resumed my education, Langston University required that I take American history. So I did what I had to do to earn my bachelor's degree, and I enrolled in an American history class. And this is where it all unfolded. I remember sitting in history class and the teacher was discussing the Civil War and Abraham Lincoln. He said that Lincoln was not really concerned about slavery, but more so about preserving the Union. The teacher then quotes half of what Lincoln said: "If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it." I know I was left with the impression that Lincoln was not sympathetic to the colored race. Well, the truth of the matter is Abraham Lincoln did have adverse feelings about slavery. Let's look at his complete statement. "If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing all the slaves, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing some and leaving others alone, I would also do that. What I do about slavery and the colored race, I do because I believe it helps to save this Union. And what I forbear because I do not believe it would help to save the Union. I shall do less whenever I shall believe what I am doing hurts the cause, and I shall do more whenever I shall believe doing more will help the cause. I shall try to correct errors when shown to be errors, and I shall adopt new views so fast as they shall appear to be true views. I have here stated my purpose according to my view of official duty, and I intend no modification of my oft-expressed personal wish that all men everywhere could be free. Yours, A. Lincoln." We see that it was his often expressed personal wish that all men everywhere could be free. Abraham Lincoln has been misrepresented by some historians, but from what my research revealed is that Abraham Lincoln had a spiritual moral compass. He had a moral compass which was led by God. Let's look at one fragment of a speech on slavery, made so plain by our good Father in heaven that all feel and understand it, even down to brutes and creeping insects. "The ant who has toiled and dragged a crumb to his nest will furiously defend the fruit of his labor against whatever robber assails him, so plain that the most dumb and stupid slave that ever toiled for a master does constantly know that he is wronged, so plain that no one high or low ever does mistake it, except in a plainly selfish way. For although volume upon volume is written to prove slavery a good thing, A very good thing. We never hear of the man who wishes to take the good of it by being a slave himself. Most governments have been based practically on the denial of the equal rights of men. As I have in part stated them, ours began by affirming those rights. They said some men are too ignorant and vicious to share in government. Possibly so, said we, and by your system, you would always keep them ignorant and vicious. We proposed to give all a chance, and we expected the weak to grow stronger, the ignorant wiser, and all better and happier together. I think by now it is pretty clear that Abraham Lincoln truly believed in equal rights for all men. I bet you didn't know that way back in the 1600s, free blacks owned slaves. Yes, blacks owned slaves in the Confederate South. People who tend to continue to hold on to those old slavery wounds as if their backs felt the lash of the whip don't mention this little fact about history. Maybe it's because they don't know it. Question: how is it that you have all these free black people in America? The census of 1830 lists 3,775 free Negroes who owned a total of 12,760 slaves. In the United States, there were roughly around 319,599 free blacks in 1830. Wow. Most people have the impression that if you were black and you lived during this time period, you were a slave. I even thought this before my re-education into factual history. Yes, black people had plantations and slaves that they owned and worked on those plantations. For example, in 1860, William Ellerson of South Carolina owned 63 black slaves. Out of the 171 black slave owners in South Carolina, Mr. Ellison had the largest amount of black slaves. Movies like Amistad and Roots give you the impression that Europeans are the sole reason that this evil spot in American history ever took place. Well, we know that evil is present in this world for a reason, and that is the fall of man. All throughout history, the sinful nature of man has been conquering and dominating weaker tribes of men and enslaving them. There had been a slave trade in Africa prior to the arrival of Europeans. The demand for slaves altered African society, which meant those that were enslaved began to grow at a rapid pace. Many professional slave traders set up posts all along the West African coast. Question: whom did they enter into business with? Africans. Yes, they purchased slaves from Africans in exchange for firearms and other goods. What about the 5 civilized nations that also had slaves? You had the Chickasaw, Cherokee, Choctaw, Creek, and Seminole Native Americans who owned around 12,000 slaves. One interesting fact: when a white trader would have relations with the Native American, that child would inherit the enslaved people and their children and the right to use tribal land. This allowed the expansion of wealth and ability to have farms and plantations. When slavery was officially ended, the Africans did not have any place to go, so many stayed on the reservation. Native Americans and Africans produced children. Question: did the black Native Americans come about by this mean only, or were there black Native Americans here living with the red Native Americans? That will be a topic for another day. Do you now see a clear picture in this whole scheme of inciting Americans, black and white, to be disgruntled with his own country? You hear other sold-out black people in the industry doing their part to advocate for hatred of America. This is only one means by which they plan to destroy this country, through brainwashing. We must all do our due diligence to know the facts. Thank you for tuning in to the Dead Zone. Come back each week as we explore a different case and try to bring back lost individuals from the Dead Zone.